panel of the second day of the United Nations Environment Program and Global Network for Human Rights in the Environment School on Human Rights in the Environment. This year, our theme is water, from oceans to taps, looking at all of the aspects of water as it intersects with human rights.
And we're super excited to open this panel today. It's titled Human Rights Ethics of Water Consumption, which looks to outline 5 ethical traditions in support of the necessity of just consumption. And before we hand this panel over to our panelists, just a few housekeeping matters. So first, we're recording the session and hopefully posting it to our YouTube. So if anyone doesn't want to appear on the recording, please just turn your camera off. And we also have closed captioning enabled for this session. So please just enable that on your screen if that would be helpful to you. And the chat is open. So please feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself, or if you have questions or points of clarification during the presentation. We'll also have an opportunity at the end of the presentation for everyone to ask their questions, and Anna and I will be moderating that as well. There also is a reactions button on your screen if you want to raise your hand or give us a smiley face or thumbs up during the session. And please, please, please let us know if you have any technical difficulties that we can assist with, or if any questions arise at all, if you get kicked out of the meeting. And Anna and I will be happy to assist you. And so without any further ado, we'll be happy to hand over this session to our panelists. So over to you all.
Okay.
Our panelists want to introduce themselves. That would be lovely.
Do you want to introduce our panelists, Mahmoud?
Just 1 minute. You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. It is an honor for me to present my colleagues, to introduce my colleagues to you. We have, 4 speakers, and I'm going to be perhaps one of them. First, I want to introduce to you our colleague, Betty Baba from University of Calgary. Also, we have Stanley Anozi from Boston College in the US. We have also Senyoy Jardin from Cameroon, and also Ahmad Hosseini from Tehran, and I'm Mahmoud Masali from Ottawa. So 5 of us in the panel, and we're going to start by Betty. Is that right? You're the first one.
Yeah.
If you hear me, Betty, you can start, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you once more for inviting me to this meeting, this panel. I'm so excited to have this exchange this morning.
Your voice is, you can, Betty. Something wrong with?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Welcome again to this panel. I'm glad to meet and share my ideas with every one of you in this panel. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Am I to start?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So, just, I'm getting, okay.
Do you know how to slide, how to share your slide?
Yeah, I do. So, yes, okay. So, today's topic will be on the judicious need in the society for potable water. So, we'll be taking a cross look into what it is to have potable water in Africa, Nigeria, and globally. So for the Africans, they believe that water is colorless and tasteless, but you can live on it longer than eating. So the question is, should individuals have access to clean potable water? Is it their legitimate right to have access to clean water? If so, then why do we have about 1 billion people lacking water, potable water, or 2 billion people who have access, who don't have access to drink potable water, and they are actually suffering from diseases and living in a deplorable situation. So we can see kids who are actually fetching water from, a dirty, filthy environment. And how do these children, manage drinking water which is not potable? So actually from UNICEF, from the report from UNICEF, UNICEF, have the belief that we have water everywhere, and we don't have enough water to drink. So the problem of resolving this water is, I would say it's called for, because we still have about 6 million Nigerians lacking access to safe water, according to UNICEF. And only 42% of Nigeria have access to potable water. As we all know, water is essential and a basic need for each and every one of us, because it's on a daily basis. We use water, we wash our hands, we go to the toilets, and we do cook with water. And how much water do we use? Actually, it shows and illustrates that we need this water on a daily basis. So we will say, is it essential or optional? Of course, it is essential. So now for going forward, in 2015, given the situation, actually, we have a potable water issue not resolved in some of this country, and most people are facing grievous, situation, especially the kids, which I actually showed much of in this slide. So when we look at global use of water, we have 69% used in agriculture, 23% in industry, and 8% for domestic use on the domestic basis. So globally, when we look into Africa, globally, we can see the percentage of shortage of water. Indeed, there's shortage of water in this jet age. Globalizing, I think there's need to, have more, have at least a way of resolving this problem before 2023. So 2030, sorry. So global water scarcity has been pronounced, and we are actually should be working towards it to have a potable water in our society. So globally and in Africa, access to clean water is our biggest challenge. So we lack plumbing, we don't have potable water. Although we have, global, worldwide, bottled water, waters from wells, and, the means whereby this water can be accessible to individuals. So a picture of a woman, because we can see actually that women they are actually victim of nature, if I dare say, a child who is by the sea, a riverside, trying to get at least a bucket of water for their daily use. Sorry. So actually, this issue of potable water has been challenging worldwide. And in 2010, the United Nations declared water as a fundamental right. This means that the right to have potable water, free from diseases, and to have a good sanitation, as we have seen in the previous slide. It's not actually what we saw, the young kids who are by the riverside, they can be infected with diseases or, can, get, if they drink that, we know which danger it englobes. So the same thing we've seen young girls at the tender age really suffering from this issue of not having potable water. So by 2030, it's estimated that 1.7 billion will be affected, because if this problem is not resolved as soon as possible, we'll still have casualties, and it will be a difficult situation worldwide. So the challenges of having clean and safe water is, I would say it's important, as Africa has serious water crisis, and we have lakes, we have rivers, we have streams. Well, these streams, this natural gift we have, we should be able to, get potable water for our kids and for the future generations. So actually, we have women, because they are actually in the private sphere, they do a lot of, so African population, there's risk because there's lack of finance, capability of having a adaptable technology to be able to meet up with the shortage of the water system, which is not actually accessible to everybody. So over 300 million Africans lack access to potable water today as we speak, and 700 millions are living in poor condition without adequate sanitation, from what we have seen and have shared from the slide. So I thank everybody for listening, and I waiting if there's questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Betty. I have a question. Betty, somebody, one of the slides, slide I think number 16, you said that 1,300,000,000 Africans lack access to clean water.
Sorry, 16.
No, perhaps another slide, maybe the one down, yeah, perhaps number 17.
No,
is that, please go to that.
No,
Perhaps
no.
number 17, no? Somewhere
No,
you said 1 billion,
no.
1.3 billion.
Yeah, I'm going. Yeah,
is that the right? I think that is not correct.
Well, as for now, this is the statistic I have, but there's this issue of water, but it might have, reduced, because we have facilities now. Since the intervention of the United Nations, we have other facilities, but we still have people going to the stream to get water on daily basis.
Okay, thank you very much.
So that, the statistics still holds, but we might, tend to say it's diminishing as for now.
Thank you very much, Betty. Thank you. Just, I have a question for colleagues at Southampton University. Do you want us to continue with the rest of the lectures and then we'll start the questions and comments? What do you suggest, Stephanie?
It's very much up to you, whatever you'd like to do, but maybe to make sure that everyone has time to present, we should do the presentations first and then time for discussion afterwards.
No problem. So thank you very much. So please stop slide sharing. It is right now Stanley, Dr. Stanley Anozi from Boston College. Please go ahead. It's your time. Unmute your microphone. Oh, it is good. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Can you see what I have?
Yes. Yes, Stanley.
Right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to interact with every one of us today on this very important subject matter, human rights, ethics of water consumption. So I'll be focusing my attention on a positive evaluation of justice as fairness in distribution of water. I would like to make references to scholars like Immanuel Kant, Alan Gewirth. Of course, the perspective that is presented today is kind of an improved version on the philosophical views of John Rawls, the idea of justice, So what I would like to proceed with is kind of to lay out what is going on. This is a philosophical perspective to our current water crisis or the act in terms of distribution of water. For John Rawls, based on the influence of Immanuel Kant, and also from the philosophical position of Alan Gewirth, he looks at the idea of justice as fairness. And what does that mean? Fairness in relation to understanding that every human being within a society has to be free, every human being within a society has to be equal, and every human being within a society has to be reasonable or rational. In this case, that will be at the foundation of having a society based on fairness. And for John Rawls, fairness, or rather justice, is the principal virtue, is the primary virtue of any society. And so that is coming from the influence of Immanuel Kant, known as the ethicist in terms of deontological ethics, the ethics of duty. You may call it the ethics of responsibility, doing the right thing because it's the right thing and not just because it's good. So he is, Immanuel Kant in this case is looking at things from a very rationalistic perspective. And so he offers us the principle of rationality, or the principle of reason. He offers us the principle of universalizability. He offers us the principle of humanity, and he offers us the principle of autonomy. And these principles are going to be very important in terms of understanding the idea of the essentiality of water and how we could go about the distribution of water. So, and then the other person I would like to talk about in relation to this idea of theory of justice is Alan Gewirth, especially in his Community of Right and Reason and Morality. He makes reference to an important concept, which is called the principle of generic consistency. I'm adopting this principle of generic consistency in order to illustrate the fact that as human beings, we have to understand from the epistemological perspective and from a realist perspective that we are all equal and should be treated from an equal perspective, and that you may call or reflect as the principle of equity. And now, having said that, let me proceed with John Rawls' views in terms of understanding justice as fairness. There are two things that are very important here. First, the principle of equity, and then the principle of equality or inequality, if you want to express it in a via negativa perspective. The principle of equity is coming from the essence that we have to think about justice as fairness as giving people what they need because they are essentially human beings. And then the principle of inequality or equality will really address the problems of inequality among us, the inequality that may arise as problems of capabilities or circumstances of life. You know, things will never really be perfect, but then there's a way to balance it. We have to take care of those who are most in need and those who are affected by the circumstances of life. For example, the circumstances of war, the circumstances of natural disaster, and all that stuff in relation to accessibility to water and other needs of life. So these are the two views that John Rawls will bring to the table in terms of expressing his position about justice as fairness. Now, I would like to proceed with the philosophical position of Immanuel Kant, the deontologist approach. We have to proceed in terms of looking at what does it mean to be a human being? Because I do think that in the current situation of our lives, it seems that we are taking ourselves too seriously. What do I mean by that? Certain sections of our society, certain sections of our world will consider themselves as kind of the privileged, the capitalist world, able to use more of nature's resources more than other people. But if we have to look at it life from the most important aspect of it, which is from the perspective of justice, we have to perceive our humanity. Our humanity should be first important. It's not just the idea of rationality or reason, but we also look at life from the perspective of universalizability, being able to universalize that which is essential to all of us, that we are part of nature, but nature is an inclusive being. If I'm gonna put it this way, nature is an inclusive being, not just human beings, but every aspect of nature. This reminds me the commentaries by someone like Rene Descartes. You know, for Rene Descartes, human beings are the possessors and masters of the earth. And this, from the history of Western philosophical tradition, that is part of the basis of the inequality in terms of the usage of water or water consumptions in our world. The water consumption that affects the poor is not the same as the situation that impact the life of the rich. The water consumption situation, for example, like Betty made reference to in terms of Nigeria, in terms of situations in Africa, is not necessarily the situation, for example, in Germany, in the UK, in Canada, or in the United States. So this is an issue that we have to look at from the perspective of our humanity, from the perspective of understanding what does it mean to be a human being, a human person, a being that has freedom and freedom to express himself or herself and to actualize oneself without intimidation around him. And this intimidation could be intimidation that affects the capacity of the person, or even intimidation or influences in terms of impoverishing situations of life that hinder people from thinking for themselves, thinking for their well-being, and the democratization of the natural resources that we have, including water and land and all that whatnot. Now, I would like to proceed with the next point here that I think is very important. I would like to make references to some research, data, and facts that have really kind of affirmed the current situations of our life. For example, recently in South Africa, precisely Nelson Mandela Bay Area, they were talking about people reducing the amount of water they use. So they're talking about 50 liters. In Canada, it's about 325 to 350 liters per person. In the United States, it's about a person to 82 gallons, which is estimated by CNN as very close to 372 liters per person. You could see the margin for the South African person, and the current situation is 50 liters to use. And then you think about the Canadian context, and then you think about the American context. So you could see right away the sense of inequality in the capacity, in the affordability, in the accessibility to potable water or good water or fresh water and safe water. So these are the disturbing issues of our time that we have to address from the philosophical position of John Rawls, but improved with the perspective of Immanuel Kant and Alan Goverth. Here, I would like to conclude my position by making reference not just to Alan Goverth, but also to Spinoza. I think is very important here. Spinoza's contribution is very interesting. What do I mean by that? He looks at nature, where now we include land, water, and all the resources, as an inclusive being, as an inclusive reality. So human beings, we are not the masters, we are not the possessors of the earth, we are not the measure of the natural resources of the earth. We are only participant, if I'm gonna put it this way, but our views of life, our relevance is only from an inclusive perspective. We can't afford to take ourselves too seriously. What do I mean? We have to be able to think about nature itself, water for plants, water for other peoples in every part of the world, water in terms of agricultural process, water that we consume in terms of our homes. Do we waste them? Do we allow leakages and all that stuff? These are issues important in understanding ourselves, because I think there is an epistemological dimension to the crisis of water in our world, to the crisis of distribution of water in our world, to the crisis of understanding justice as fairness and taking care of the needs of those who are most disadvantaged in the current dispensation of our world. And then finally, I would like to kind of put everything together to make sure that there is a sense of understanding of the point that I'm pushing. The point I'm trying to push here is that if we have to address the current dynamics of water distribution, potable water distributions of our world, we have to understand it from the perspective of who we are as human beings, as human persons, and human beings and human persons that have rights, but it's not an exclusive right in terms of what is human well-being. It has to be understood from the principle of generic consistency, not just we as human beings and human persons, but the animate and inanimate dimensions of existence. Water, nature, other forms of nature have their rights, have their dignities that must be respected in order for us to really be able to manage what we have. And that brings me to the point that the right to use of water, that is a gift of nature, is part of nature, and human beings, we are all part of nature. And then from Spinoza's position that I think is very important, nature is us and we are all part of nature. And so the more we use nature with a sense of dignity and sense of respect, then we are able to have an inclusive understanding of the right to use the natural resources, including water, and the right to think about justice as fairness for all and for nature and for humanity and for everything that we ever can imagine. And so at the end of the day, it's about recognizing what nature is, recognizing the place of human being within nature, and also recognizing, yes, that justice is actually about fairness to all these dynamics of our reality and the dynamics of our humanity. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Stanley. A beautiful presentation. Especially I see your presentation is a kind of response to the questions about Africa's today, Africa's lack of access to clean and potable water. Thank you very much. The next speaker in our panel is GNHRE-UNEP, Dr. Geraldine from Cameroon, from Yaoundé. GNHRE, please go ahead.
Hi.
Okay, you want to share slides?
Yeah,
okay.
I will do. Good evening, everyone. I have to apologize for my bad voice. I've been suffering from a sore throat, and today is actually the first day I am able to talk. So I may not talk much.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to talk on the topic. It's all about the rape of water, and the world goes asunder. I'm so sorry that the first slide is not the topic. So it's all about the rape of water, and the world goes asunder. The rape of water bodies. What is rape? Rape is that forceful taking away of something from someone without the consent of that particular person. And our focus is on the misuse of water bodies in Bamida City, where I live. Professor Mahmoud. I come from Bamenda and not Yaoundé. I know Yaoundé is the capital of Cameroon, but I live in Bamenda, the northwest region of Cameroon. And water is the number one need of all that has life and wants to continue living. There is no justice at all when it comes to the distribution and use of water in many places in the world, especially in Cameroon and Bamenda City in particular. This paper presents the rep of water bodies in Bamenda City and its consequences on the inhabitants and other aquatic life of that city. Water bodies become a dumping place for all kinds of unwanted waste, thereby depriving every inhabitant of the city and other aquatic life the right to fresh and safe water. This is a stream at the Bamenda Food Market. This stream is a dumping ground for every kind of waste. If you look at this picture, I took this picture when this meeting or seminar was announced. So I didn't have enough time to go around because every stream in this town is a dumping ground. And as you can see, Betty gave the definition, the African definition of water as colorless, tasteless. But you see this water has, in this picture, it is actually green or something between soapy. And you see the waste. Those sheds are the sheds from the market. They are leaning on the stream. And nobody cares about it. And this one is a stream at La Chance, Bamenda City. It's a quarter, another quarter. And the sanitation company itself places trash cans beside the bridges. It's a general phenomenon. The individuals who are not sensitized are dumping on the streams, and the city council itself. And you look at the picture, see, these are the trash cans placed by the city council. And you see the trashes are already full, and part of the refuse is on the tar road. From there, what happens? The wind or the rain carries it into the stream. As you see, that blue pipe is a water project. Was done by the Chinese. I wonder if it serves any water to anybody in this town. During the dry season, there is no water at all to drink because all the streams are polluted and no one has where to carry water. And the pipes like these ones that you see are all empty. No water flows from them. You go into a home, you turn on the tap, nothing comes out. And you get, or what you get from there is just a whistling sound to tell you that what is found in this pipe is just air. And most often, even when the water flows, it is not drinkable because it's very dirty, very brown. So the question is, we are talking about the scarcity of water for all human beings, but nature has done it in such a way that there is water everywhere. This town has more than 7 springs, 7 streams that spring from the mountains. If I could turn my laptop, for example, let me show you something. If I turn my laptop, you can see there is a mountain, and I was trying, my internet doesn't work well. I was trying to upload a video, and this video is just not far away from where I live. It is the only cleanest stream that we had. And this stream has a small reserve forest, what you can call a natural reserve. But you know what happened recently because of the crisis? The city council was afraid to go and dump where they think that the liberation fighters are settled. So they're afraid they're going to attack them. So they located this particular spot, the only clean stream. The source itself, what we can call the catchment, and they are dumping there and burning, it is upstream. And all of that washes itself down to Bamenda town because the city is a lowland. So where do we go from here? I think, please, oh, sorry, can't even play. I thought that video was going to play, so, but with time, I'm going to upload the videos when my internet is fine, and I can share with you. So the question is, who then can supply clean water to this city? During the dry season this year, Bamenda city was hit hardest. Where I am at the orphanage where I work and where I grew up. We go and we have more than 50 children. No water at all. Even the well, the orphanage was depending on God dry. And we used to take containers and put in a pickup and go miles to go and carry water from a very dirty stream, water you can't even cook with. And you struggle, you boil, and then what happens, the consequence is people get sick. People get cholera, they get dysentery, they get amoeba and all kinds of stomach complications. And the food that the women cultivate along these streams that are already polluted, the water during the dry season, and the water is already contaminated, so the food itself gets contaminated, and the people consume and they get sick. So at the end of the day, my conclusion is water is being wrecked all over the world. I was happy to listen to Betty's presentation. She comes from Nigeria. I often visit Nigeria, and I'm that kind of person that is very passionate about the environment. In 2017, I went to Imo State University to present a paper on World Environment Day. And I was taking pictures along the way. When I saw River Niger, Nigeria suffers a lot of water crisis. Betty, it is not improved. I spent my holidays in Nigeria. It is even worse than in Cameroon. And River Niger is a huge river, but if you look at it, it is flooded with plastic, papers, bottles, tins, clothes, everything from Onitsha market is sent onto this river. All our rivers are just dumping places. The government doesn't care. No one cares, and the children are not sensitized. So we need to do something. There is enough water in the world for everybody, but we need to protect the water. I'm done. Thank you so much for listening. Can you hear me?
Mahmoud, you're on mute with.
Yes. Thank you very much, SHRE. I see your presentation and Betty's presentation. At the same line, almost both of them concentrated on Africa. Thank you very much, dear SHRE. I want to invite Mr. Hosseini Ahmad from Tehran, who is going to give a presentation about distribution of water in Iran today. Do you hear us, Ahmad? Can you please go ahead?
Yes, I have your voice.
Okay. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Excuse me, due to my condition in Iran, because of my connection is poor and Zoom also is filtered in Iran, I have to turn off my webcam. Excuse me, due to my conditions. And do you have my screen?
Ahmad?
Do you have my screen?
Yes, yes. Yes.
Yes, excuse me. Hi, dear professor and students. Initially, I appreciate Dr. Masaili due to inviting me. According to my time, I want to get to main points. In this presentation, I'm gonna present some features of injustice of water allocation in Iran. Before that, I'm gonna start, it should be considered that this presentation is only an exploratory look at injustice of water in Iran. So there is necessity of starting profoundly to recognize what the injustice is precisely. As you can see, Iran is located in an arid and semi-arid region, so its amount of precipitation is annually for less than other countries located, for example, in Europe or North America. These limiting conditions has caused that Iranian people have historically considered water allocation and its security as the primary issue of water management arena. The right picture, as you can see, shows us the stages of distribution of precipitation across Iran. As you can see, these stages is not just over 50% of Iran's area is faced with a severe condition by a precipitation less than 100 millimeters per year, while the average amount is almost 250 millimeters per year. Also, the left graph shows the dependence of irrigation upon surface and groundwater resources. As expected, the eastern regions, this area, the eastern regions such as Khorasan or Kerman are reliable on groundwater resources. By contrast, the western areas were ranked on the highest rank in terms of irrigation by surface waters. Or regarding water consumption, as the left figure shows, over 55% of water consumption in Iran is dependent on groundwater resources. Additionally, irrigation, as expected, is the primary sector in terms of water consumption by over 92%. And groundwater is the primary source of agricultural water by over 60% in Iran. The right graph also refers to the trend of population and water per capita in Iran from 6 previous decades to the future by 2040, as it predicted, due to increasing population of Iran, similar to other countries of the West Asia region. The water per capita is continuously worsening. It's predicted that water per capita will be almost 1,000 cubic meters per capita yearly by 2040. This fact means the future of water stations in terms of accessibility will be under a crisis condition. And this implies some people, to a large extent, can't access to a decent water, even for drinking and sanitation water. The subject that we are seeing some related witnesses in recent years. For example, by 2021, Iran's rural population had been about 20 million people. Of those, unfortunately, about 3 million people didn't have any access to tap water. Also, about 9 million ones didn't have secure access to safe water for drinking water and sanitation. In the following, I want to deal with some aspects of water injustice in Iran. As you can see, we can discuss regarding water injustices of Iran in terms of at least 4 dimensions: intergenerational, political, economy, type of consumption, and type of water, including surface, groundwater, gray waters, and etc. According to my time, I will only discuss 2 aspects entitled intergenerational and political economy. Of course, I will point out to other implicitly. Well, regarding intergenerational aspect, we can deal with issue in terms of 2 dimensions, namely groundwater and surface water resources. In terms of groundwater allocation, as you can see, from 5 previous decades, there has been an increasingly trend regarding the volume of water withdrawal and drilled wells. But after 2030, this point, highlighted point, although the trend of drilled wells has been still increasing, the volume of water withdrawal has decreased. On the other hand, due to extracting groundwater unsustainably, annually the number of prohibited planes has been increasing, which means there are no extra non-renewable groundwater to be allocated for new purposes or unplanned and sudden conditions. In other words, the next generations have no strategic water resources for the purpose of dealing with the future crises or issues. Also, the next generations have to encounter new risks stemmed from new issues, such as land subsidence. The right figure shows that at the moment, there are numerous spots of land subsidence across Iran, which this condition imposes new risks, especially economic and social ones, on the next generations. Also, in terms of index of sustainability corresponding to the stages of aquifers, during the preceding decades, the stages of aquifers have been worsening. According to this graph, we can result that almost there aren't economical and high quality groundwater resources for the next generations. Also, concerning intergenerational injustices to service water allocation, it can be said that due to building numerous dams over previous decades, according to this graph, left graph, at the moment, approximately, there is no any regulated volume of service water to be allocated for the purpose of new activities or new concerns, especially environmental concerns. That means there is no any service water resources as a public resources for the next generations. Paying attention to new resources such as desalinated transmission water to the long distance spots is one of the evidence regarding the lack of decent water for new activities or concerns in Iran. Also, the crisis stages of wetland and lakes such as Urmia Lake or Gavkhoni wetland as famous natural ecosystem of Iran refers to the lack of service water as public resources to be allocated for the purpose of environmental concerns. Political economy. Water injustice is the second aspect mentioned before. Regarding this dimension, I want to present water injustices in terms of 2 points, namely regional and institutional injustice. Under regional category, dealing with interbasin transmission is the famous subject. Also, regarding institutional injustices, the allocation of groundwater is the salient point. I will try to present one case in regard to each point. If my time let me deal with both dimensions, excuse me. The story of Isfahan's water crisis and interbasin water transfer to them is always a controversial issue and debate reported by social and mass media widely. But today I want to deal with this issue in terms of water allocation, allocated justice. Excuse me. According to the studies, Isfahan is one of the primary recipients of water transfer in Iran. According to the left picture, for example, 50% of the famous and huge water transfer projects have been conducted for the purpose of Isfahan. Based on this matter, the supply capacity of water in Isfahan have been increasingly over eight previous decades, so that this issue has led to increasingly population. This graph, as you can see, in the central plateau of Iran, where historically have not been occupied by a huge number of residents. But today, Isfahan is the third and ninth city ranked in terms of population in Iran and West Asia regions, respectively, unfortunately. In this respect, a remarkable question has arisen: how this matter has been able to continue for over several decades. To answer this question, it's essential to consider 2 points. The first one is drought as the reason that provides the pretext for justifying water transfer projects to Isfahan. And the second and a more important point is pertinent to the political endorsement of these water-dependent economic measures. Drought has been advocated as a key reason of water crisis in Isfahan and the Rud River across the mass media over these years. While according to the statistic of annual precipitation of Isfahan station, this graph, the left graph, during over 1 century, the amount of precipitation of this area has only decreased by 7%. But by contrast, the supply capacity of water has almost increased to 3 times this graph, as you can see. In addition, concerning the second but significant point is the political endorsement of the mentioned projects. One of the facts that clear the situation of political economy and the role in these cases is dealing with the birthplace of prominent politicians of Iran. According to this issue, at least after Iranian revolution in 1979, Isfahan has always been a primary region. For example, according to the right figure, over 20% of ministers has belonged to the Isfahan region during these years, while there is no person as a minister belonging to the two upstream provinces, Charmahal Bakhtiyari and Kokilu Ahmad. In fact, it can be said that Isfahan is the most important region after Tehran as capital city of Iran. This situation makes it possible for Isfahanian residents to conduct numerous and huge water-dependent projects. So in comparison to other neighboring provinces, even Khuzestan, as a famous region in terms of natural resources such as oil, gas, water, and soil, Isfahan has a more produced GDP. By the way, on the other flip side, we have faced with water injustices, even drinking and sanitation water. For example, in 2021, over 20% of rural areas in Khuzestan province, no access to tap water, like city dwellers. Moreover, the highest unemployment rate belongs to two upstream provinces of Isfahan, namely Charmahal Bakhtiyari and Kohkilubur Ahmad. At the end of the day, it can be stated that future generations will be faced with critical points which should deal with them in terms of justice. Access to water in a higher cost, or no extra fresh water as a public resources to be to be allocated and under severe conditions such as drought and access to water in a lower quality, also access to water per capita in far less level, approximately 1,000 cubic meter per capita, and finally reallocation of water under severe political conflicts is some of critical points regarding next generation. So at the moment, it's essential to have to deal with this question, how we can promisingly use the ethics and ethical principles to recognize and overcome water injustices in allocation. And finally, thanks you for attention, and I'm here to answer your question.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Thank you very much. Actually, I see 3 cases, Iran, Cameroon, and also Africa in general. So we had 3 presentations about the cases. Stanley's presentation was about ethics. It is my time to look at ethics too, but I have to go very quickly because I look at the time, not that much time. We have to use some times for discussions and comments and the questions. So I gotta extend my talk also around the same topic that Stanley presented. And what I'm gonna do is that I want to look at Kantian perspective, and how I want to start my presentation is to just go up. I want to look at this question or this topic to ask what is the rational just consumption, or also in order to look at especially in the groundwork of metaphysics of morals. That is what I want to do. Very fast, maybe 5 minutes and not more, because you have to leave some space for discussions. If I want to think about unethical aspects of water consumption or unjust consumption, some
Mahmoud, can you hear us? We seem to be losing you.
just want to commend our friends
Okay, I think Mahmoud's having some internet problems, and so hopefully he'll connect.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm in the zone, I'm in the jungle. That is all my issues.
You're back. We hear you.
I'm back, yeah. I'm in the jungle, so here is not that much good. Hopefully I can continue the rest.
Okay,
So Kant, thank you. Kant suggests us to think about our duties as rational moral human beings, as the moral agents. If you want to think about water which is consumed by us, either in a just manner or unjust manner, we have to think of our duties. There are 2 aspects associated with the duty of all human beings. The first is something which is called negative duty or negative obligation. What is that? Negative obligation says that all human beings, as the moral beings, they're supposed to consume whatever they want based on their own free will, as long as they do not inflict harm to anyone else. It is called a negative duty. So I and you, where we are located right now, I'm in the west side of Canada. It's so beautiful, a lot of water you cannot even imagine. So it is my right to enjoy, for example, this situation. However, the question is whether my enjoyment of my freedom in whatever way that I'm doing, whether that enjoyment results in the negative effects for other people. So Kant argues that if you want to think about your consumption, your behavior, your position, whatever you do in all aspects of your life, you must think about a question: whatever I'm doing is inflicting harm to others or not? If we take this question into consideration, we can certainly argue that the unjust distribution of water in today's world has been caused by us, because we never think about the consequence of our consumption, especially the capitalist countries. So we are inflicting harm, a lot of harm, to the rest of the world. If in Africa, if in Iran, elsewhere, the situation is like this, that is because of the structural causes of the current, I believe, unbridled global capitalist system. So we are inflicting all those issues and challenges to the rest of the world. So that is the question about the negative, that is the point about the negative duty. However, Kant argues that us as the moral, rational human beings, or as the autonomous beings, we are supposed to think about our own positive duty. And what is that? Positive duty or obligation is the one that says that you should enjoy your own freedom. At the same time, you should do something. There's an ought, there is a must, there is a duty for you to try for the freedom of the others. So if you are, for example, in the Western countries, we are enjoying whatever is available to us. At the same time, we are obliged, I want to say, we are obliged morally to dedicate ourselves to removing of all obstacles. For example, facing African people today having access to water. So Kant then says that if you want to think about the consumption in whatever aspect of the life, let's say for now the water, first of all, you must think about your duty as a rational, moral human being. The negative duty means enjoy your own freedom. However, there's a limitation there. You cannot enjoy your freedom as much as you want. You should do that as long as the others can enjoy their freedom too. And the second part about the positive duty is that you are committed to some certain kind of responsibility for the rest of people. That is a very short introduction that I wanted to provide, and I go quickly to the next slide, maybe a couple of minutes, and not that much. So if you want to think about water, an unjust distribution of water in today's world, and you want to think about how that unjust situation must be responded. From a Kantian perspective, there is a need to think about the just consumption. I would like to remind you, if you search the name of Adela Cortina of Valencia University of Spain has published a book about just consumption. If you're interested to look at the book, and I follow her arguments in line with Martin Nussbaum's argument, or even Amartya Sen's argument, you can see what do I mean by just consumption. The just consumption means that we, as the human beings, as the rational beings, we must just everything, we must consume everything in a just manner, including water. We are not supposed to do whatever we want. At the same time, we must commit ourselves to a kind of sustainable consumption. Consumption of water with a view to the future, to the future generation, with a view to the rest of the world who are living in all parts, corners of the world. At the same time, the just consumption for us as the rational, moral, autonomous human beings, we must follow a kind of agent-relative view of consumption. It is not to say that, for example, I living in this country and I have access to water, I can do whatever I want. This I person must become, according to Kant, a practical me, part of a we in the world. So this I becomes a part of the responsibility comes on my shoulder to think about whether I am consuming as a rational, moral human being or not. faster to the next slide very quickly. At the same time, from a Kantian perspective, it can be argued that the just consumption of water depends on a sense of co-responsibility or co-responsible consumption. Any approach, any ethical view about just consumption of water involves a certain kind of co-responsibility. Responsibility of you, my responsibility, what we, all of us, must do together as human beings, as individual human beings, as the member of the community, as the member of the professional association, as a member of the civil society organizations, etc., etc. So all of us together, all practical me or practical I persons in the context, we must all be together in order to think we can answer the serious challenges that us. If we want to have access to water in order to be happy in whatever way that we want to challenge, we must define our own conception of happiness. What does it mean to say that, okay, I'm happy people in Cameroon are not happy. The argument happiness is a conception which has been misunderstood deeply into this world. So there's a need to move away from the common sense understanding of happiness when we want to consume the water and think about happiness understood from the ancient perspective in terms of eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is a perspective of happiness which extends deep roots to the needs of the community of mankind. So we cannot say that I'm happy because I'm living a full society, Canadian society, and so on. So this meaning of happiness is nonsense. It is wrong understanding of happiness. From a Kantian perspective, we can quickly conclude that happiness means a sense of being with the rest of the people all around the world. In order to reach this kind of maybe perspective, all of us are in need of taking the responsibility and somehow be with people. I do not want to continue more than this very quickly. That was a very short presentation. So I want to stop this, and we are open right now to discussions, questions, and comments. I don't know who's going to moderate the session. Do you want me to continue, Diana, Stefani, or you want to do that, please? Do you want me to continue?
You're going in and out a little bit, Mahmoud, so maybe, no, we can, although we can't hear you at the moment, I think you're on mute, but so maybe Stephanie, if you're up for moderating this.
Yeah, great. So we have some wonderful questions in the chat. There was some discussion in the chat. I actually don't see any questions right now, but if the panelists have any questions for each other, or if anyone in the audience wants to ask a question, now would be the time.
Because of the weak access to the internet here, can you please continue?
Yes, we're continuing. So Stephanie was just saying she's opening the floor for questions.
Okay, yes, okay. I see one question in the chat box. Do you want to read that one? Or someone else want to raise a question?
It's a comment, but I think it's really an interesting comment because it's about governance. So the comment says, and I think it's directed at Geraldine's note about the River Niger. It says, you're right about the River Niger and most water bodies in Nigeria, and you'll be stunned at how much the government at the 3 tiers budgets annually for water management, all of which is looted by public office holders. I wonder if I could could turn that into a bit of a question, because it seems to me that there's been a very interesting dynamic in the discussion in the panel today, which is a really fascinating panel. Thank you to all of our panelists, because much of the sort of ethics that you, Mahmoud, and Stanley were talking about sort of understanding a personhood and understanding a personhood in relationship to consumption, in relationship to society, seems to me to be more of a sort of individual ethics, whereas the 3 case studies we look at are very much about sort of sustained, multi-decade institutional injustice, political injustice, colonial injustice, problems of governance and corruption. How do we bring sort of conceptions of personhood and water in Stanley's case, and a kind of Kantian ethics of personhood that you were talking about, Mahmoud, to these sorts of cases, which seem to me to be cases of kind of profound historical, social, structural, political injustice.
Thank you very much. Also, in addition to your question, Diana, I see another question by Christina in the chat box. A question for Stanley and I. Can we also link the conception of responsibility and moral duty to that of solidarity? If yes, how? Stanley, please, you go ahead, and then I follow you after you. Unmute your microphone.
All right. Thank you so much, and for the question, as well as the question Mahmoud Maseli modified for our discussion. I think we can't really talk about structural injustice or leadership or governance issues without getting to the bottom of the issue, which is how seriously we take ourselves, you know, whether within the Western world or within the African world. There is need for an integral review of how seriously we take ourselves, how we define ourselves, what you may call work of someone like Taher Shadin, the idea of man's place in nature, which I will use in inclusive sense, human person's place in nature. And so, you know, when we talk about justice, it's about justice for Uche, that's my indigenous name, or justice for Stephanie, or justice for Mahmoud. That we have to look at it, you borrow in the concept that Mahmoud Maseli kind of shared with us, the sense of co-responsibility, inclusivity. It's not about we human beings. It's not just about the dog right. It's not just about the, you know, the right of vegetation. Or it has to be seen in a very inclusive sense. And this is why I try to improve upon the John Rawls' contribution, Immanuel Kant's contribution by borrowing Alan Gevert's principle of generic consistency, which is this idea of inclusivity, which is the idea that what we have is actually nature, and human beings are part of nature, and how human beings kind of lead themselves within a society, imagine their society, is also part of nature that we have to understand. And even the policies that we make as government officials, as whatever that you may call it at various levels, should be in awareness and consciousness of the rights of everything that is within nature. And then I think it's quite connected with the question that is modified, that was modified by Professor Mahmoud Maseli on the chat section, you know, from this ethics of responsibility, or what you may call relational accountability, which is also Alan Gevert's perspective, relational accountability, we can move it to an ethics of solidarity. Yeah, recently I was teaching with my students this idea of a work by Pope Francis talking about this idea of our humanity, fratelli tutti, human brotherhood, human sisterhood, social friendship or solidarity. That is the ethics. That is something that is the current way of looking at our world that will help us, but not just about our brotherhood and social friendship, but our friendship in relation to the so-called non-human aspect of nature or the inanimate aspect of nature. And so we all deserve the right, we all deserve the responsibility, we all have a role to play in this idea of justice as fairness and making the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stanley. Thank you also, Diana and Christina, for two interesting points that you raised. I think that the biggest problem concerning water in today's world is that in order to tackle the cause, the roots of the issues, the Kantian perspective that I presented or Stanley presented is not that much helpful. We are in need of establishing or following a kind of maybe theoretical perspective that is more associated with dependency theory. Perhaps that is the best thing. However, since I wanted to be more concentrated on Kantian perspective, I want to say that I want to enjoy Stanley's argument that we are part of the nature as people, as animals, part of the nature. We are mostly living as the phenomenal people. And that is the biggest problem. We have not been able that much to integrate ourselves in the community of humanity or moving from animality to humanity. That is why we are not able to control ourselves as human beings and we consume a lot. Imagine when we go to Costco, for example, when I buy a milk, we come back with a cart full of articles there. That is called unjust consumption. From a Kantian perspective, there is a need for us to educate ourselves that we are the self-legislative human beings. So we must be able to control ourselves. In order to be able to control ourselves, we are in need of a kind of attentive, a very precise view and judgment about ourselves, asking ourselves whether what we are doing is inflicting harm to others or not. So if we take this question from Kantian perspective, then we will be able to move away from the world of animality and slowly move toward establishing the world of humanity to become a we, all of us together. And here is that the co-responsibility makes sense for us. If I want to also look at the question by Christina, solidarity makes sense only when we take the co-responsibility into consideration. Otherwise, no, solidarity doesn't work from a Kantian perspective. First of all, we must draw on the ethics of duty. Ethics of duty for humanity. To think that we are human beings, we are autonomous beings, and we are aware of what we are doing. Essentially, we are aware of what we are doing. I must educate ourselves that we must consume, we must behave as the members of the community of human beings and not the member of the world of animals or the phenomenal beings. So Kant teaches us that if we try to integrate ourselves and move toward the world of humanity, and if we are able to establish our own personality altogether to form a we via a kind of ethics which is constructed by all of us, of course, we are in need of taking some steps toward preserving the rights of all members of the community of human beings. Now, here we think about whether the concept of duty can be complete with responsibility or co-responsibility. Imagine, just want to say one more sentence, that problem from Kantian perspective in today's world is that we think about ourselves as I. When we look at the discourse of human rights, everything is about associated we are behaving like most like the selfish people, like we are caught a lot of issues ourselves and how we can educate our fellow human beings to be together as a community of mankind, as Kant argues. And in this way is that we are in need of the concept of co-responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you both for your answers. I've had a anonymous question from a shy question asker who doesn't want to ask under their name. The question is for each of the other panelists, actually, for Betty, Geraldine, and Syed Ahmed. It's about, the question is about community, what kind of community organization and resistance there's been in response to the problems and limitations and corruption around water availability in each of your countries. Whether there's been, I think, yeah, whether there's been like community organization and resistance in response.
Very interesting question, but tough question.
Yeah, I will take that. I will talk in terms of solidarity, especially from the Igbo land where I hail from. There had been much of solidarity in the 50s, 60s. But since we are going global, you just have to pay for water because it's sold. You cannot go across to, request that from your neighbor. And the worst you can do is to go to the stream if you have anyone around you. And I'll go further with, the toilets. I remember when I got to Ghana, you have to pay if you don't have the toilet. You just, or as earlier my colleague was talking about, the riverside is, polluted because everybody throws trashes in there. So I'll come and confirm, maybe I'll hear from others, that there's no solidarity with this jet age. People, you just have to help yourself and, organize yourself to get an outlet. So the poor will get poorer and the rich will get richer. So people are becoming so helpless now.
I have some issues with understanding. I'm not sure whether that is my internet here in the resort or that is yours.
You're having some issues with hearing?
Yeah, because I know it's because of the internet here, my location, or that is yours.
I think it might be on your side. You've been coming in and out a little bit.
Sorry about that. I'm suffering with anger right now.
We've still been able to hear your responses. I wonder if either of the other panelists wanted to say something, add to Betty's response.
Hello, Stephanie. Sorry, Dinah.
No, go ahead.
I would like to say something in relation to the question that was asked concerning community responsibility. I'm sorry, regarding community responsibility. It's a pity in my community because no one cares, but very few people care. I do care. The orphanage where I live do care or does care because our upbringing is such that it starts from home. Proper waste management, because when waste is not well managed from the level of the family, and then it gets out to the community, if each family can contain and manage their waste very well, then it's not going to get out there to the streets. And another kind of person that promotes organic cultivation of crops, flowers, spices, and so on and so forth. So the initial thing is to create a compost in families so that the biodegradable goes to the farms because in most African communities, at least there's always a garden. If there is no garden, the council can organize people so that when you take your trash to the dumping place, they will separate, collect the non-biodegradable and put aside, and take the biodegradable and put aside, and they can even build up something to do organic manure fertilizer and sell back to the farmers. And that can raise a lot of funds for the community, but nobody cares. They dump everything together. And I know you talked about colonization. It's a pity in Africa, because I will always go back to Niger because it's a wide river and it is flowing along Onitsha Market on either side. And it is Onitsha Market is one of the largest markets in West Africa, where Betty comes from. She talks about Ebola, and I know she must not Onitsha. And you see that there's a lot of plastic. We import a lot of it from China, from all over the world. But what do we do with this? There's no recycling. And the councils can open up companies. There are human beings individuals who bring up projects. Okay, let's do this. But the government stifles it with taxes. So the government is not willing. I can say that the principal problem is with the government in place. Because if the government can give rules and regulations, waste management, sensitize people, go to schools and do this, then it's going to do so much justice to the community and to the water bodies. But if I get up as an individual and I teach, I tell the students, yes, you do this, but just at that level, how much of it, by the time they get home, their parents are doing the same. They eat anything, they throw anywhere, they sweep, it goes to the stream. So there is no solidarity, and the government doesn't care because they have their own water sources. It's the poor who suffer. They can never lack. Now, many people are paying huge sums of money to have boreholes. It takes millions of CFA to have a borehole, and it takes hundreds of thousands to have a well. And having a well is not enough. You have to treat it in order to make sure that it is drinkable. So something has to be done at the level of politics. It's all about nasty politics. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Hannah. If you have time a little, just 1 minute, just to remind the friends about this special question, that perhaps some of the most urgent needs for us to think about decolonizing the mind. The biggest problem, I think, now, again, from Kantian perspective, is that we do not know what we are doing. So people are ignorant. So we must draw on ourselves and to see how our mind has been captured by others and how the others are imposing their own view, their own perspective, and so on us. So that is the point that I want to raise very quickly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's a good point, Professor
Diana?
Hassan. That's a good point, decolonizing the mind.
Thank you very much.
But it will take decades.
Of course, for everyone, colonize the mind for everyone, not only Africans, everywhere in the world.
Unless there's any other final points that any of the panelists want to make, I think we're sort of at the end of our time. Anna or Stephanie, do one of you want to close up, or?
Yeah, I can. Well, thank you so much, everybody. This was incredibly interesting. I loved seeing how the sort of two individual rights to justice perspectives sort of connected with the 3 case studies in a broader context. And that was really interesting to hear. A wonderful discussion at the end. Thank you so much to the panelists for their time. And tomorrow we have a really great slew of sessions. We will drop the link in the chat so that everyone can register and take a look at the program. And we hope to see you all there tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just a quick note that if you're interested in more explanation, or especially Kantian perspective, I don't know if Stanley agrees or not, you can contact us. I can share the email. You can contact me or either all of us, of course, for not a personal conversation about the topics, either the case studies or about the theoretical, more comprehensive approach of Kantian perspective. So the email, Donna can share the email. Donna, you can share my email, of course. You can do that. Stanley and the other friends, I don't know if they are willing, they can give this permit to Diana. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Bye.